On a bright summer afternoon, the ghost train of Ely, Nevada rides again. More than a century after it was first built in 1909, engine number 93 rolls through the Nevada sagebrush. Powered by coal fire and steam, with engineer Dale Olson at the controls and fireman Angie Craycraft doing the heavy lifting.
Fireman, fire, whatever. I shovel coal.
She's the train master. She's my boss.
Olson, a retired United Airlines pilot, is among those breathing life into what a Smithsonian Museum official called the best preserved historic railroad in the country, bar none. A summer ride on the rails powered by a vintage steam engine is just the tiny tip of the iceberg of what the ghost train is all about. The Nevada Northern Railway, as it's officially known, is not just some kind of amusement park ride, but an entire century-old railroad operation, complete with shops, tools, cars, tracks, and much more, run almost exclusively by volunteers.
I can hardly imagine doing this 12 hours a day, what the firemen did back in the day.
While Angie is one of the few paid staffers, Olson is among the dozens of volunteers who do most everything it takes to make the trains go, from selling tickets to serving as conductor, brakeman, fireman, and yes, even engineer.
Started out doing some brakeman work and then moving to fireman and then engineer.
People are interested in our heritage, our history, can actually come out, volunteer here at the railroad, work their way up the progression, and yes, they can get up in the right-hand seat of the steam locomotive and be one of our steam engineers.
Dale drives 6 hours just to be here, staying in a hotel on his own dime to come and run the train. But it's time well spent.
I'm old enough to remember the last of steam on the major railroads, and I never dreamt that I would even get a ride in a steam engine, let alone be able to run one. so it's good.
The man who spent a career in the cockpit of America's most sophisticated jetliners can appreciate the antique technology of a locomotive that was the space shuttle of its day.
That's one of the things, is that this is 100 years old, and economically it is outmoded, but it still gets the job done. It gets the cars up and down the hill, just not as efficiently as the new stuff does. It's enduring technology.
It still works.
It does. Works very well.
But keeping these engines rolling is a labor-intensive job.
Every hour you run it, you got to work on an hour. Probably more than that, probably 3 to 1.
That's just because the stuff is so old?
No, it's just the way it was built.
They did that when it was new.
Never did it new.
Yeah. They had big crews working on this.
Inside the cavernous engine house, welder Gary North is fixing a stress fracture in the boiler of this railroad's other operating steam engine. Old number 40 was built in Philadelphia back in 1910. But thanks to the daily efforts of a small crack crew of full-time mechanics, the engine runs like a well-maintained classic car.
It's probably in better shape than when they were using it all the time.
Really?
Yeah. Got a lot better oils and lubes and bearing material.
The engine house is like a time capsule from a bygone era. It's as if all the mechanics, welders, and the others who once kept the trains running here have just stepped out for lunch. And back in the day, this railroad was a very busy place.
We're essentially a ghost of our past. During the day, 32 passenger trains, 60 ore trains, and a couple of freight trains each day left from right here. Hundreds of people worked here, thousands of people took the trains. This was the steam-powered internet of its day.
Today, no more than a train a day leaves the station, but just firing up a single steam engine takes an awful lot of work.
You got to boil 1,200 gallons of water and develop about 180 pounds of pressure.
From a cold start, it takes some 4 hours to heat enough water to build enough steam pressure to power the wheels to bring this locomotive to life. In 1910, there was no such thing as sealed bearings, so oiling was and remains a constant job to keep the moving parts lubricated.
Having oil around the bearing attracts dirt. Comes in, so it scratches everything up and wears it out quick.
While the technology is primitive, the guys who maintain these engines do admire the work of their mechanical ancestors.
And it's real interesting when you tear into them and find out how they built them back in the day. and they're all real accurate. You can use your modern technology measurements, and their measurements are right on.
And while servicing and repairing train engines is a hard, heavy, and dirty job, there's a tangible sense of satisfaction among those who do the work.
It's kind of nice seeing stuff you work on running, making people happy, riding a steam engine. Anything mechanical, you like seeing it move.
And few people anywhere like their jobs as much as John Henry McDonald.
I got lucky. There's not too many places that run steam locomotives, and there's even fewer that'll pay you to do it.
22-year-old John Henry first came here as a 16-year-old on a high school internship program. 6 years later, he works here full-time. And while quick to point out he's still learning, this young man can do most any job here.
I work in the shop, I do track work, I'm in train service, I'm an engineer, I'm a fireman, brakeman, and yeah, in the shop I'm just a shop helper. Come on up.
He's also quite the tour guide.
If that's caboose 3.
But that's a switch list from the Nevada Northern when this caboose was still running for him.
It's great fun to walk with him through the old buildings around the rail yard. The huge structures contain a fascinating variety of historic equipment and vintage rail cars.
That's our 1907 100-ton steam crane, and it still runs. This was built in 1907 also.
And what is this?
It's a rotary snowplow. 81 was built by Baldwin in 1917. This was the last steam locomotive the Nevada Northern ordered new. It's in rough shape. They've taken a lot of parts off of it to keep the other 2 locomotives running. It's got a mail slot.
Yeah?
And so you could literally, if it was parked at the station, you could walk up and drop your letter through to the mail clerk.
The Nevada Northern offers public tours of the aging property, donated in its entirety when the railroad shut down in 1983. It began when the first tracks were laid here in 1905 by Mark Requa to haul the ore from what would become the giant Kennecott copper mine outside Ely. Copper that would wire the nation, first for electricity and then for telephones. And as the sign says in the big engine shop, there's a lesson to be learned from the history of this place.
I think the railroad tells the story of America that we're losing. And that story is a story of can-do-itness. We're not going out and doing things, building things, conquering things.
That may be true elsewhere, but here in Ely, the can-do spirit appears to be in good shape.
I mean, that's the only way you can learn about something that's over 100 years old and they haven't made since the 50s. And this place, it tells a good story about what the United States used to be like.
And it can be your story too. If you've ever wanted to be the engineer on an old-time steam engine, you can make it happen here, either by working your way up as a volunteer or through the Nevada Northern's Engineer Experience Program, where if you meet certain conditions, you can essentially pay to run the train. It's not cheap, but then neither is the cost of running this most unique operating museum.
People think our steam locomotives burn coal. They don't. They burn bricks of $20 bills.
Your dollars are critical to keeping this living history alive and well, and making sure that this marvel of the past rolls on into the future.
I encourage you to become a member of either the Nevada Northern Railway Museum or the Railroad Museum that's near your home.
The Nevada Northern has all kinds of special events throughout the year, including a Christmas season Polar Express, photography workshops, and much more. Or you could just go for a ride. All kinds of ways to experience this most unique piece of living American history.